My name is Raymond Calloway. I am 60 years old. This past October, I drove home from my late wife's memorial with white roses still in my hands and found my key no longer worked in my own front door. 2 suitcases sat waiting on the porch, and a text from my son read, "Stay at a hotel for a few days. The house is getting renovation work done." Hours later, I learned he had flown to Hawaii with his wife and her family instead. So I sold the house, packed one bag, and disappeared. 5 days later, my phone rang, and for the first time in 60 years, hearing my own son's voice sent a chill down my spine. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you are listening from. Now let me take you back to a kitchen table, a wife who saw something coming long before I did, and a letter she left for exactly this day. Eleanor and I lived in the same house on Meadow Lane for 22 years, since our son Mitchell was still in elementary school. She planted deep red roses along the front walk that first spring, roses that came back faithfully every year without being asked. Every Sunday morning for 31 years, she made sourdough bread, a little rosemary tucked into the dough the way her mother taught her. The whole house, smelling like warmth I did not understand until she was gone, was mostly her, and not the bread at all. She always called white roses honest. Flowers, clean and simple and true, nothing pretending to be something else. When she was dying, she pressed a small wooden box into my hands and told me to keep it close, not because I would need what was inside right away, but because the day would come when I would. Mitchell grew into a man who spoke about our house as though it were already his, who referred to our savings in conversations with his wife, Vanessa, as what we'll have when things sort themselves out. I did not see it. Clearly, Eleanor did. She noticed the way he once looked at her jewelry when he thought no one was watching, the same calculating expression he wore as a boy at Christmas. 3 years after Eleanor passed, I still drove to Greenwich Cemetery every October 14th at dawn, the anniversary of the day she went somewhere quieter, as she used to say. Mitchell knew that date better than anyone. He had stood beside me at that grave 2 years running. He chose it anyway. I came home from the cemetery that morning to find my key rejected by the lock, 2 suitcases, and my old overnight bag stacked on the porch. My neighbor Dorothea Finch showed me a photograph she had taken the morning before, time-stamped 6:47 a.m. Mitchell, Vanessa, and her mother Gloria loading themselves into a black SUV, laughing, smiling, Gloria already reaching for her phone to take a selfie. They were not loading renovation materials. They were loading suitcases for Hawaii. I stood on that porch a long time. It was not the locked door that undid me. It was the date. He had known exactly what day it was and chosen it anyway. I laid the white roses I had carried home from the cemetery on the welcome mat, not for him, not for myself, simply because they deserved better than my cold hands, and drove away without looking back. That night, in a $47 motel on the Post Road, I opened the wooden box Eleanor had given me 8 months before she died. Beneath a photograph from our honeymoon and a note from Mitchell's 8th grade teacher, I found a sealed envelope in her handwriting. For Raymond, open only if the day comes. Inside was a 3-page letter she had written 2 years before she passed, explaining gently that she had noticed things about Mitchell that quietly frightened her, and that she knew me well enough to know I would forgive him 3 times before I let myself see clearly. Attached to the letter was the deed to our house, held under joint tenancy with right of survivorship, meaning full ownership had already transferred to me alone the moment she passed. Mitchell's name appeared nowhere on it. Her will, notarized 3 years before her death, left everything to me without exception. Her final paragraph told me plainly, if they ever lock you out of your own home, don't beg to be let back in. Walk away from all of it. Build something they can never take from you, because it will be built from who you are, and not from what you own. She had already made sure of that, long before I ever understood I would need it. At the bottom of the box, beneath the documents, I found a small notebook with a cracked blue cover. Eleanor's sourdough recipe written out across years in different colored pens, with a note dated 6 months before she died. Raymond, this one is for you, not for company. Make it when you need to remember that good things take time and cannot be rushed. I called a realtor the next morning, a woman named Patricia Owens, who had sold 3 houses on our street over the years and knew exactly how quickly a motivated seller with clean title could move. I told her I wanted the house on Meadow Lane sold within the month, as is, no showing scheduled around anyone's convenience but mine. I wish this had gone differently. I wish my son had been the kind of man who understood that some dates are sacred, instead of one who scheduled his own celebration around his mother's memorial because he assumed I would forgive him before I even asked why. But wishes do not undo the person Mitchell had quietly become over several years. The truth does. I sat in that motel room that first night and let myself cry fully. The way Eleanor always said, a man who refuses to feel is simply refusing to be honest. 4 nights later, just before midnight, I signed the final closing documents on the house on Meadow Lane, sold for slightly under market value in exchange for a 14-day close, Patricia handling every detail so that by the time Mitchell returned from Hawaii, there would be nothing left standing between him and an empty driveway. I packed 1 bag that night, Eleanor's wooden box wrapped carefully inside a sweater at the center of it, and confirmed the wire transfer to a new account only I controlled. 11:58. I am 60 years old. I am, for the first time in 3 years, building something entirely my own. 5 days after that October morning, Mitchell landed back in Connecticut, tan unrested, expecting to find his father waiting quietly at a hotel somewhere nearby, exactly where he had left me. He had no idea the house he had locked me out of no longer belonged to either of us. Mitchell called me the day he landed. I let it ring twice before answering, and for the first time in 60 years, hearing his voice sent a genuine chill through me, warm and easy, as though nothing at all had happened. "Dad," he said, "we're back. You can move back into the house whenever you're ready." I told him there was no house to move back into. I had sold it 11 days earlier. The silence on the line lasted longer than I expected. When he finally spoke again, his voice had lost every trace of its easy warmth. "What do you mean you sold it? That's my house too," I told him plainly. It had never once been his, that his mother had made certain of that years before either of us understood why it would matter. He looked at me, even over the phone, the way he always had, like I was still the father who would eventually apologize for the inconvenience I had caused him. I was not. I had not been since the moment I read his mother's letter in a $47 motel room. Eleanor used to say that a man who refuses to cry is just a man who refuses to feel. I always thought she meant that simply as comfort for grief. I understand now she meant something larger, that refusing to feel clearly is exactly what let me forgive Mitchell long past the point the evidence had stopped supporting it. Mitchell has called several times since I answer sometimes. Vanessa and Gloria, from what I hear, have said very little about any of it. As for me, I bought a small cottage 2 towns over with a kitchen just large enough for 1 bread bowl, and I make Eleanor's sourdough every Sunday morning now, exactly the way her notebook describes it, slowly, without rushing. I think of her every time that dough begins to rise, and I think, she protected me long after she was gone, in the one way she knew I would actually accept it, quietly, and only when I truly needed it. If you have ever discovered someone you loved had been protecting you from a truth you were not yet ready to see, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments, and if this one moved you, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There is more where this came from.